Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending this EIQ webcast called Defense in Depth, How Layered Cybersecurity Provides the Best Defense Against Data Breaches. My name is Kevin Lant. I'm a Senior Product Manager here at EIQ. Just a reminder that all attendees are in listen-only mode, but you can use the question box if you have any questions or comments or feedback, and we'll try to follow up with you after the session. Defense in depth as a strategy goes back a long time. The key concept is that you have multiple defenses instead of a single point of failure. So if one thing fails, you've got other things that take over. A classic example would be a castle. It's built with very high walls in order to keep people out. But if an attacker uses a ladder, the walls can be defeated. So you want to have multiple layers. And that might be something like a moat. So now you've got an additional security layer that protects against one of your weaknesses and provides layered defense. The second key concept is that you don't just add layers for the sake of adding layers. The layers should be chosen strategically, and they should complement the defenses that you already have. So the moat helps defend against people carrying ladders. But now, how do we stop people who are really good swimmers? Well, one option would be, why don't we add some sharks? That'll get the swimmers, right? But a key to defense in depth is making good strategic choices with a cost-benefit analysis. It really doesn't make sense to try to capture a shark, transport it to your castle, keep it alive, and maintain it. The costs outweigh the benefits. And the third key concept for defense in depth is that you're never finished. There's always going to be new threats to consider. There's a reason that we don't use castles anymore for defense. The technology has become obsolete over time against today's threats. So let's look at how defense in depth applies to IT security. Here's a typical starting point for a network. You've got traffic from outside the network. It has to traverse a firewall, and then it has access to your internal network. And then you've got your servers and laptops and desktops, and those are going to be behind the firewall. They're going to require individual authentication, usually as part of a network domain. So there's a good reason that we start with the firewall. It's really the best defense against unauthorized traffic. So every packet that's coming in is being inspected, and it's making sure it's part of a legitimate connection. The other great thing about the firewall is it lets you define what is a legitimate connection for each of your different devices, users, network segments. Gives you a lot of granularity. And you can then block all the ports that aren't open. So if it's a port in a protocol that doesn't have a real business reason for being open, you can close it on your firewall, and now you've significantly reduced your attack surface that someone could try to exploit. No defense is perfect, so the firewall does have some limitations, and we want to take note of those so that we can define our defense in-depth strategy to cover those limitations. So the firewall can't protect against authorized traffic. In order for your business to function, you have to allow at least some openings. Email, for example, you want to allow it in. Web traffic on port 80 or 443, or authenticated VPN users. Whenever you're opening the door to authorized traffic, that means people you don't want could get in. So that's a limitation. And it doesn't protect against threats inside your network. So that could be one of your systems sending malware to other systems within your network. Or it could be a malicious insider causing damage or accessing resources they shouldn't. And lastly, the firewall itself could come under attack. It runs software. Software is written by humans. It will contain flaws. So attackers could try to compromise the firewall itself. And so our point isn't that firewalls are bad or useless. It's just that we want to recognize what the limitations are and try to address those weaknesses. So one of the most common ways to complement a firewall is a network intrusion detection or intrusion prevention system. The firewall is looking for valid connections, but it's not really inspecting the actual content of the traffic. And the IPS makes up for that by looking for threats in the content itself. So if you've got the IPS located inside the firewall, it can also help detect threats that are moving laterally between internal systems. And because the IPS is located in line with your network traffic, it can take action on the traffic before it actually gets to your endpoints. And a nice thing about most modern IPS systems is they've got countermeasures built into them. So the system can take some direct action when a threat is detected. For example, it could automatically block ports or drop packets to take defensive action. So these are all strengths that make up for some of the weaknesses of a firewall. And while the IPS does solve some of those limitations, it does have some limitations of its own. It often relies on attack signatures, which you have to keep up to date in order to catch the latest threats. And that leaves you vulnerable to the newest ones. More recently, IPS technology has started to use behavior-based pattern matching, but unfortunately that can cause a lot of false positives. It's really hard to tell what type of behavior is normal or not normal. And you also have the risk of false negatives. Attackers can disguise themselves by hiding in normal-looking traffic, and it doesn't trip alarms. And because it's network-based, the IPS only has a view of your network traffic. It isn't aware of events that are taking place on your endpoints, and it can't really tie those together. Another common security layer that you would add with your firewall and your IPS would be a security gateway, also known as a proxy server. Again, the goal is to look at the connections that the firewall has allowed and make sure nothing bad got in. So instead of looking for traffic signatures or patterns, the gateway can take a few other approaches. One of them would be web filtering. This is where we're looking for bad websites or types of content that violate the policies we've set up. There's email filtering. Same idea, we're trying to catch a bad email, spam, links or attachments that might be malicious. Some vendors these days can do malware detection in the gateway, looking at the files in the network, trying to sniff out malware, perhaps doing sandboxing like a FireEye would do. And then some of the gateways today also include application monitoring or application control. So the ability to look at applications and see which protocols they're using and see if they adhere to your policies. Again, every defense has its pros and its cons. The limitations we have here, again, we're going to see false alarms. And those are the risks when you're filtering web traffic or email. It can be difficult to tell what should be allowed. Anytime you're blocking things like that, it can affect your users and their productivity, so you need to be careful about how much you limit. Like any other device, the gateway could be subject to attack or a system failure. And since all your web traffic is running through here, downtime is obviously going to be pretty bad as far as business impacts go. And like the IPS and the firewall, it's got visibility into your network events, but not so much on the host and what's happening on the host. And that leaves some gaps in your vision. So here's an updated look at our network now that we've added a few layers. And these new layers are really designed to complement each other. And for most organizations, it's worth the cost to add these additional layers. There's also been a lot of movement in the industry towards consolidating a lot of these layers. They go by a couple names. You'll see Unified Threat Management, or UTM. And more recently, the Next Generation Firewall is the popular term. So the exact functionality is going to vary depending on the vendor, but a lot of these will include the firewall, the IPS, the VPN, and then one or more of those gateway functions all combined into a single device. So you'll need to do your own cost-benefit analysis and weigh the risks of using individual point products versus a consolidated product. There's obviously going to be lower cost, lower maintenance, but you also have less redundancy. So it's really up to each organization to figure out what leaves you in the best position. And then we've got our end users. So as much as you try to prevent attackers from getting through with all these network security tools, inevitably something's going to reach the host. So we need to look at what type of defense layers we can add at the host to protect them. Obviously, authentication is pretty important. I mentioned that at the beginning. You want to make sure people have strong passwords. You want to make sure your users are limited to the privilege levels that they actually need. But one of the problems is that most organizations aren't monitoring the authentication events. So they wouldn't know about suspicious activity if it was occurring. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Beyond authentication, there are some additional defensive layers that we can use on the host. Anti-malware or antivirus, everyone I think knows about these days. It's been around forever, very widely used. We've also got application control, and that's either, it's usually either a whitelist or a blacklist of applications that are allowed to run on the host. This is another one where you really have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Application control can struggle a bit on desktops or laptops where there are so many applications with so many different versions. It probably makes more sense on a server where the number of applications is more limited and the change windows are more tightly controlled. And servers are also likely to be worth the cost since they tend to have more business impact. Policy control is going to help you keep track of how systems are configured and what permissions users are allowed to have. You can measure the configurations against a standard image and detect any deviations and policy violations. You'll also see patch management tends to fall into those categories. There's also host-based firewall and host-based IPS. These are similar to their network counterparts, but they're installed locally and they only defend the individual workstation. And then one last security component you often see on the endpoints is encryption. So it could be full disk encryption where the whole hard drive is encrypted. It could be rule-based where certain types of data are tagged as sensitive, and then there's mandatory encryption on those things that are tagged. And this is another one where you've got impacts on the user potentially. Much like the consolidation that we've seen going on with UTMs and next-gen firewalls, the security on the workstations and servers has also been consolidating into a category that's more generally just called endpoint security. Again, as we're designing our defense in depth, we want to be aware of any limitations. And so it takes a lot of time and effort to set up and manage all these components on all of our endpoints. And every layer that you add on is going to add more maintenance work for the IT team. So it's important to make sure that it's worth the effort whenever you add something new. Because these are running on our host systems, they can definitely affect system performance and affect your users. Again, encryption in particular can require a lot of processing power and slow down your system, so you probably want to use it only where it's really needed. And now we've got the opposite problem that we had with our firewalls and gateways and other network devices. Now we've got visibility into the host events, but these products do not really have the big picture about what's happening across your network. So now that we have our host security in place, I just want to look at two ways to address those limitations in the overall system. The first is vulnerability assessment. One of the limitations that we saw with each new layer we added is that the security device or the software that we added could itself become a target. So we definitely need to scan for known vulnerabilities in those systems. There's also a whole list of legitimate software on our workstations that could contain vulnerabilities. So the defensive layers we added might not protect against certain exploits because it looks like a valid connection, it's using expected behavior, and it's an approved software program. So it all looks good to us, but that approved software program itself could contain vulnerabilities, and the best way to protect against that is by doing vulnerability scanning. We want to make sure we're doing external scanning to catch any vulnerabilities that are exposed to an outsider. And we also need to do internal scanning. We already talked about how some of our perimeter defenses might have blind spots. So we definitely need to catch internal vulnerabilities that could be exploited after an attacker gets inside. Vulnerability assessment can help you fix a lot of the potential holes in your defenses. Unfortunately, it has its own challenges. And these are really more process-oriented. Vulnerability reports could run 100 pages or more. So how do you prioritize the vulnerabilities in a way that has the best cost-benefit for your organization? And the second challenge is actually managing that remediation process and making sure the vulnerabilities actually get fixed. So in a minute, I'll talk a little bit about how EIQ can help with these two challenges. The other way to address the limitations is with log management and SIEM technology, and this is where we really tie everything together. So we have a bunch of security layers now, but the information is in separate silos. The network devices have no visibility into the host events and vice versa. With SIEM, what we can do is collect all of the dispersed data. We can centralize it and index it. And that includes syslog feeds, Windows events, NetFlow, and a variety of other data that's probably going to be security relevant. And then once it's centralized, we can do correlation, reporting, and searching so that we have a big picture view of what our threat landscape looks like. And we can also package up all that data in ways that helps with our compliance audits. And the other big weakness we can address with SIEM is false positives. So we can use the correlation rules to tune out a lot of the noise. So if our IDS is noisy and kicking off a lot of false alerts, we can correlate it with our firewall events or our gateway events or our host events and filter it down to events we actually need to know about. Of course, again, we've got limitations every time we add components. And like vulnerability assessment, the key limitation with SIEM is usually time and effort. Setting up a SIEM properly takes a big time investment for the IT team. It also requires a large amount of ongoing management. The correlation and alert rules really need to be tuned to provide the appropriate filtering. And the alerts are not going to be much use to you if no one's there to investigate them when they go off. So this is another area where EIQ can help and help pull all of your different defenses together so they work together. EIQ offers 2 managed services that are designed to help with your defense in-depth strategy. We offer both vulnerability management as well as security monitoring under our SOCVue name. We call it SOCVue because it's driven by our Security Operations Center, which is operational 24/7. And the team is there to help you be a resource for you to overcome your vulnerability assessment and SIEM challenges. The service is delivered through the web-based SOCVue portal, which gives you a unified console so that you can view your security status and manage your tickets, download your reports, check your dashboards, all in a single console. SOCVue is a hybrid SaaS. That's how we like to call it because it's a subscription-based software, but it also includes managed services along with it. Management, we include Qualys Cloud, which is an industry-leading vulnerability scanning solution. It's fully managed by our SOC team, so there's no installation or maintenance on the part of our customers. And you get unlimited scans based on your desired schedule. Where EIQ really helps solve the limitations of vulnerability assessment is through prioritization and ticketing. So our SOC team is going to analyze the scan results for you, so you don't have to sift through that 100-page report. The team's going to prioritize the critical issues, and they're going to use our custom ticketing system, which is built into the portal, to make sure that remediation occurs. And they'll make sure it happens in a timely manner, and they can follow up with you on whatever schedule you work out with them in order to follow up and make sure things get remediated. For those of you that have PCI compliance requirements, the service does include PCI scanning, and Qualys is an approved scanning vendor, so we can take care of your PCI scanning needs. Next is our security monitoring service, and this is really the nerve center for a defense in-depth strategy. The SOC team will install and manage SIEM. It's EIQ's award-winning SOCVue platform. They're going to set up customized alert rules, working with you to understand your unique network environment, and they'll help you monitor for events and security incidents, and they're on call 24/7. So you don't have to staff your own monitoring resources. Our team's there to do that for you. When the team discovers something you need to know about, you're going to receive an incident notification along with guidance about the potential impact and the recommended steps to take next. And again, they're going to use that built-in ticketing system to make sure everything gets followed up on. With our 24/7 SOC team managing the solution, you can really overcome a lot of those typical SIEM challenges, complicated setup, ongoing maintenance, all the tuning. That's all taken care of for you by our SOC team. So just to summarize our defense in depth with a few do's and don'ts. Don't add layers just for the sake of adding more layers. More is not always better. Do think strategically about how adding a new layer is going to mitigate risk for you. Don't necessarily chase the latest hot products. Do a cost-benefit analysis to make sure the new technology is actually going to make you more secure at a reasonable cost. Don't forget that threats are always changing, and you're going to need to make updates to your strategy over time. And do consider how much time and money your team is going to spend over the lifetime of the product. It's an important consideration. The other thing I invite you to do is sign up for a demo of our SOCVue services. Check out the SOCVue portal, and you can sign up at our website, eiqnetworks.com. We have a weekly scheduled demo if you'd just like to join and listen, or if you'd like something more personalized where you can interact with one of our solutions engineers, we can sign you up for a one-on-one demo. So I know everyone's very busy. That's why you're looking at managed services for your security, so I appreciate the time you've taken today to join. If you do want to follow up on anything, please feel free to use the question box in the GoToWebinar, and we look forward to talking to you more about your security needs. Thank you.